I'll begin with Javier Fernandez. Javier is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Omaha Public Power District. He joined OPPD in June of 2017, initially as the Chief Financial Officer, having worked for a number of years since 2012 with the Bonneville Power Administration in the Pacific Northwest, and prior to that in the finance business. Javier became the Chief Executive Officer in July of 2021. He was educated in Mexico City as well as at Yale University. Next is Kevin Wailes, and Kevin is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Lincoln Electric System, and he's held that position since July of 2010, following a lengthy career also in public power entities, including your own utilities in Florida, as well as Lamar Utilities in Colorado. As a kind of personal aside, many of you probably know this, but Mr. Wailes has announced that he's stepping down and retiring, and is looking forward to that next phase of his life. So we're really gratified to have you here again, Kevin, for, I guess, sort of a swan song at the Wind and Solar Conference, but you've been such a key participant over the years, and I just would like to begin with a round of applause for all of your work. Thank you. And our final panelist and a brother lawyer for the first time ever, John McClure. John is the Executive Vice President for External Affairs and the General Counsel for the Nebraska Public Power District. John, I think I'm glad to say this, has been involved in the public power business even longer than me. So I have that going for me. John has vast experience in all facets of the utility industry, having testified numerous legislative committees as well as the United States Congress, and is deeply involved in our industry, as many of you know. So with that, again, thank you for being here. Come up with some good questions, and I would like to invite Mr. Fernandez.
Well, thank you, everyone, for having me again. I guess I haven't done too bad of a job in the past, and hopefully I don't disappoint. I have a lot of information to cover, but we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to go through a few slides quickly. I understand I'm the only person who has slides. Sorry, Kevin. Sorry, John. But I have a really cool story to tell, and I have a couple of pictures that I hope you find as exciting and gratifying as I do. Here's one that is both exciting and terrifying at the same time. This is a graph from EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute. If you look at 1893, when Chicago was World Fair, we were just beginning the journey of electrifying our lives. 0% of energy consumed in the United States came from electricity. All of it was a bunch of other forms of energy, but no electricity. And you can see it took the first 60 years to get us to about 3% of electricity. This is when we were building power plants and building the technology, patents, Tesla, Edison, etc. You can see the jump we had from 1950 to 2020. In the past 70 years, the use of energy in the United States went from 3%, a mere 3%, right after the World War, to about 20% today. The majority of that is refrigeration. The advent of refrigerators, freezers, and especially air conditioning. Air conditioning units, and in the mid-60s to mid-70s, when air conditioning window units became commercially available, that just took off. And it still remains today. The main use of energy is for refrigeration and climate control. That's what got us from 0% to 20%. If you're doing the math as I do, it took about 130 years. 130 years to get us from 0 to about 20% of the energy consumed in the United States being us in the electric industry. There is still a very healthy portion of that energy consumed via diesel, gasoline, transportation, a bunch of gas, etc. But 20% it's a big deal. Now look at the bottom line here. Time will tell, But there are many experts who are forecasting that in the next 30 years, 27, because we're already in 2023, we're going to go from 20% to somewhere above 40%, perhaps even 50% of the energy consumed in the United States will be electric. Now, some of you may be saying, yay, that's awesome. And I say that, and then the next sentence is, how are we going to do this? This is gigantic. The pace of electrification of the economy is happening in a way that I don't think any of us dreamed of, which is exciting. I often say the economy may not be growing, or maybe growing at a not so great rate, but I can tell you one thing, that even if the economy is not growing, the economy is electrifying. In 2022, there were more electric heat pumps sold in the United States than there were natural gas furnaces. That's already telling you that's the trend that we're going in. We're just talking about electric vehicles at the table. That's another gigantic trend for individual vehicles, all the way to fleets and semi-trucks. The digitization of the economy is also something that is hitting us head on, especially here in the state of Nebraska. By digitization of the economy, I'm talking about data centers and how much we use data and data centers on every Zoom call, WebEx, Teams call, whatever you have. We're all using a data center somewhere. Whenever all of our companies are going to the cloud, it's a server in a data center. So all of those things are coming head on as we're having this gigantic electrification of the economy, at the same time as we're all moving towards transitioning our generation fleet to decarbonization. The tale that we heard many years ago about decarbonization and electrification coming together at the same time, it's happening right now, and we have a lot of evidence to prove that. It is getting harder and harder to serve. Climate change is undeniable. It's here. What causes it? You can debate and discuss that at a different session, but what we are seeing today, the extremes in winter and summer weather patterns it's here. We're having a lot more electricity used in the United States. We're having a lot of generation retired in the United States, and the weather events, the storms that we're dealing with are unprecedented. You can see here the graph, both at the SPP, the Southwest Power Pool, the number of resource and conservative operations advisory, the number of hours we've been on conservation advisory. It's just growing. It's getting harder and harder. We get every winter and every summer, we get these notices. Hey, things are getting really tight. We don't have a lot of margin. Bring all of your units back on. If you have any units that you have on outage, bring them back on, because we're going to need the entire fleet. All the way to energy emergency advisories, level 1, 2, and in the case of Nebraska, level 3, which is what we had in February of 2021 when we had to do rolling blackouts. I don't see these getting any better anytime soon. We're busy building, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. We're busy building generation as fast as we can. We have a long list of customers who are waiting for us to build generation so that they can energize. We're retiring units, but I don't think we as a country and in the region, we can build generation as fast as we can, as fast as we need, in order for us to get us out of these recurring energy emergency alerts and conservative operations. I think this is a world that most of us are going to live in the next decade. I'm starting to get used to it. It's not great, but this is my number one priority in the organization, is resource adequacy. We need to figure out a way to build more generation fast enough to meet the electrification we have and to continue to meet the decarbonization goals that we have as a utility. This is how fast things have changed. The graph on the left shows in 2022, we were forecasting our demand, our load, to grow. The 5-year forecast back then, you can see that on the graph on the left, it showed a pretty big increase. You see the black line and the dotted line, that's our load profile plus the margin we needed to meet for SPP. It shows obviously we're a summer peaking entity. So during the summer months, August especially, that's where our peak is. We showed last year our existing resources were depicted in the gray area, and we were showing that we were going to be deficit. And so we needed to build more resources. Those are the different orange shades in there. We were busy building stuff last year. Well, last year we were already hearing from many companies that wanted to move to Nebraska, and they were asking for significant amounts of megawatts. Now, those projects were not ready yet, they were not mature yet, they were in the middle of selecting sites, etc. But those projects started to mature really quick. And they quickly became from being 10% probability of happening to more than 50%. In fact, we have projects that started construction, still on the ground and concrete, without having a path for them to get energized. That tells me that that's a 95% probability that project is going to happen once you have the building up. That's what you see on the graph on the right. Our updated forecast in 2023. Now we're forecasting 10 years out. We have customers. We have a list of customers that are waiting for us to energize them. And then we have a long list, a wait list of people who want to come in. So we have a very healthy queue that gives me the conviction to say this is very likely going to be our load in 2032. And as you can tell, the orange bars were not enough. So the generation that our board approved in 2019, while super important, proved to be insufficient. So my board in August of this year unanimously approved an additional 2.5 gigawatts of generation that we need to build. All in all is 3.2 gigawatts of new generation that our organization has been trusted by our board of directors to go out and build as fast as you can. 3.2 gigawatts. 700 megawatts of which are coming online next year. I'm incredibly proud to say that. Not a lot of utilities can say that, and I just spent the weekend with other CEOs from other public power entities, and I heard a lot of planning. I didn't hear a lot of doing. We have 700 megawatts coming online next year in the state of Nebraska to keep our economy growing, to tell people we are open for business. Come to the state, work with us. Let's coordinate, but we are open for business. That's really, really exciting. I'm going to talk about the composition of that portfolio and how that ties into wind and solar and renewables here in a minute. But I would be remiss if I didn't touch on something that concerns me quite a bit. And that is the breakdown between summer and winter. Just a few minutes ago, I mentioned we are a summer peaking utility, and we are, and will likely be forever or for a really long time. I do not want to I want to underscore the importance of winter peaks. You can see the winter peaks here are significantly less than the summer peaks. However, the growth we have seen on our winter peak and the growth we're projecting on the winter peak is gigantic. What we are projecting today is a 54% increase in our winter peak versus a 49% increase on our summer peak, just in 10 years. And I can tell you that's already happening. Last year, on December 23, 2022, we established a new winter peak. The previous winter peak for OPPD was 1,800 megawatts. Last year, in December, went from 1,800 to 2,100 megawatts. 16% increase in 1 year. So when I'm looking here at 54% in the next 10 years, it's really not out of the question. We've already experienced the first 16% increase in 1 year. On August 21st of this year, we set another summer peak. We went from roughly 2,500 megawatts to 2,800 megawatts. It's a 12% increase in 1 year on our summer peak. So again, both summer and winter are increasing, but it's really important to start focusing on winter requirements as well, because the generation, accreditation, and profile of wind and solar is going to be very different in summer than it is in winter. So we've been focusing a lot on summer, and we're super excited about our renewable portfolio and the 1,600 megawatts of renewables that we're going to bring online for mostly the summer months. But we also cannot forget about the winter peak, because that's really, really important, and it's growing as well. Okay, so of the 3,200 megawatts of generation that our board has trusted us to bring online, the first three are in the top. That's about 700 megawatts, 681 megawatts to be precise. That is coming online next year. The first two, Turtle Creek Station and Stephan Lake Station, they're natural gas peaking units, simple cycle combustion units. They are coming online late in the summer of next year, of 2024. Platteview Solar will be the largest solar array in the state of Nebraska, 81 megawatts just outside of Utah, Nebraska, in Saunders County. That should be energized in May of 2024. And I have a picture of that facility. It is up and going, and it is happening. But we're not stopping there. We have an additional 2,500 megawatts of new generation that we need to bring online. Up to 1,500 of that will be renewables, solar and or wind. We're adding up to 125 megawatts of energy storage. We're adding between 600 and 950 megawatts of additional natural gas generation capability. Again, thinking about that winter peak, thinking about the winter accreditation that we need to have to make sure that we shore up resources during the winter months. Our winter peak happens usually at 6 in the morning and 7 p.m. And I'm looking at Colton. Is that right? 6 in the morning, 7 p.m. You know what happens at 6 in the morning and 7 p.m. on a January in Nebraska? There's no sunlight. And wind usually doesn't blow regularly, consistently. So while we are counting on those resources all the time, we also need to make sure that we have enough battery storage and that we have capability to turn on turbines to make sure that we have power when we need it the most in those times of the day. We're counting on demand response as well, at least 32 megawatts of demand response. And for our existing natural gas peaking stations, we're adding dual fuel capabilities. We learned our lesson in 2021 when natural gas was not available, or it was getting less available. We never want to be in that situation again. We want to make sure that we keep people alive and warm in a cold Nebraska winter. And if we ever run out of gas, if we have any issues nationally with gas, we want to make sure that we have another source of fuel to run. Not ideal. It's not very economical. It's definitely not very sustainable. It emits quite a bit of greenhouse gas emissions, but it will be very helpful if we ever need it and we don't have gas available to have the dual fuel capability. So that's what we're doing. We're really, really busy. Here's something that I would like to slow down a little bit here, and I'm almost done, Steve, sorry. The difference between the resources to the Southwest Power Pool versus the energy that we're planning to generate. We had to explain this many times. The resolution that our board approved in August, for example, it had 40% of the portfolio measured by megawatts was natural gas, 60% renewables. So the natural conclusion is, oh my goodness, you're adding a ton of natural gas. Where is your commitment to lowering your greenhouse gas emissions? Well, that is the capability we have with SPP. We have the capability to run these units. Ideally, and once we run the models and once we run the actual dispatching of the model, 90% of the energy will be generated by renewable resources. And only 10% will be generated by natural gas. That's the projections of energy. But we always want to make sure that we have the capability. And you can see here how we're looking at the resource we have with SPP, right? In the toughest winter morning, if we had to pull our resources, those natural gas engines account for a lot. But during the year, we're expecting, and you can see here, the majority of our resources will come from that blue and yellow areas, which are wind and solar energy. So really, really important, and something that our board understands and they endorse, and they said this is in alignment with our pathways to decarbonization and being a net zero utility by 2050. It took me about 3 minutes to explain that to you. Imagine explaining that in 5 minutes on an elevator or 5 seconds on an elevator. It's really hard. So that's a big challenge. How do we communicate that our commitment to decarbonization is still very strong, even though we are building reliability and resilience with natural gas turbines? This is the last one. I want to end with this. I want to celebrate this. This is right here in our own state of Nebraska. This is our Platteview solar array. Not finished yet. It's about 75% complete. I'm looking at Carol Wazak. Courtney Kennedy, where are you? Somewhere in here, Courtney. She began that project many years ago. This is your baby. We're taking good care of it. It's going on. It will come online in May of next year. We're really, really proud. And it is only 81 megawatts. Right. On one hand, I'm excited because it's 81 megawatts. It's a ton, but it's only 81 megawatts out of the 1,600 that we need to put in. Land use continues to be one of the biggest challenges. Planning commissions, county approvals. Oh my goodness, I'm preaching to the choir here, but that continues to be probably one of our biggest challenges, and it's really communicating with landowners and farmers and county commissioners. What is this? We've never done this before. Let's have a conversation, sit down and figure out how can we build all this generation that the state of Nebraska needs so that we can keep the state of Nebraska open for business and continue to attract businesses that frankly are coming to us from other states where they cannot get the same type of service that we do. And with that, I'll finish. I'm sorry it took me a little longer, but I'm going to go sit there and hear from Kevin. Thank you.
I would be remiss, since I'm here in a substitute role for our CEO, Tom Kent, who just got back late last night from a well-deserved vacation. He was out of the country with his wife and with another couple, and I know he's kind of in a recovering mode. We have a board retreat starting tomorrow and Friday, and so I want to acknowledge our board chairman, Jerry Klopek, Mary Harding from our board, and Wayne Williams from our board, who are in attendance here. And then last, I have a bunch of colleagues from NPPD who are participants. If you're with NPPD, raise your hand. I figured out how I can use up some of my allocated time since I didn't have any slides. You know, one of the things I've done during this conference, I like to take notes. And I wish I had a little more time to put everything together, because there have been so many important points made by speakers throughout the day. And I've tried to capture some things, and they keep coming up with new slides. Here's a little piece of interesting information. Javier started talking about what happened in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. My mother's father worked there. He was a waiter at age 16 in the Swedish restaurant. So there's an interesting little connection to Javier's presentation. And Javier really did a great job setting the stage. We'd done some negotiating. I knew he had a lot to talk about, wanted him to go first. The points he's made about the transition in the industry, I couldn't agree with more. But one of the points I want to make is every electric utility is in a unique position. It's unique with its resource mix. It's unique with its particular customers, with its geography, with the nature of its loads. And I'm going to share some things about NPPD and our wholesale customers and retail customers a little later on that make us unique. For those of you who've been here, you saw from Nicole Sedlacek yesterday an overview of NPPD. That's one of the reasons I didn't bring slides. I didn't want to repeat things, but I want to hit a few highlights. As of today, NPPD is the largest utility generator in the state, and we do that with a diverse mix of fuel sources. Javier talked about all the ways we make electricity, and ultimately electricity is becoming the universal fuel. It's how we power everything in our society, and it's going to become even more so as we see increasing beneficial electrification and more electrification of the transportation sector. So at NPPD, we do this with a diverse mix, and we do it with a mix that is over 50% carbon free. And we are continuing to pursue a net zero goal by 2050. It's been an important policy determination by our board, and we will continue to move down that path. We are also the largest transmission provider in the state. We have close to 5,000 miles of high voltage transmission, which makes our utility, which operates in all or parts of 84 of the 93 counties of the state, critical to help tie together all the renewable energy that's being added to the state. And when I think about where we started, it's been mentioned before, but the fact that today we're at 3,500 megawatts of wind, Nebraska has come a long way. And clearly there's a bright future. If there's one universal agreement in this room, we all recognize we need to continue to grow the amount of renewable energy in this state and figure out how to reliably and affordably integrate it into the resource mix. One of the important things we heard about late this morning and is going to become increasingly important is the role of storage, because we have times where we can produce more renewable energy than we need, and we have times where if we can produce that and it's at a very low or negative cost at that time and charge batteries, it really helps integrate the system to make it work better. Javier and I both attended a meeting over the weekend in Savannah with large public power utilities from around the country talking about issues. I don't care if you're public power, if you're a cooperative, if you're an investor-owned, if you're serving end-use load, you will hear almost universally, we need to be affordable, we need to be reliable, we need to be sustainable, and we need to be resilient. And Nebraska's utilities, certainly the three speaking today, would all say that's critically important. The thing that I'm proud of being part of this industry for 43 years is we're delivering on that message. Steve mentioned the high reliability ratings we have in the state. I just looked at where our average revenue per kilowatt hour in this state for all utilities, it's well below the national average. That's saving our customers tens of millions of dollars every year that they keep in their pocket and have to spend for other things. As I said, each utility is unique. And Javier pointed out, there's opportunities and there's challenges. I don't want to call them obstacles, but challenges as we integrate new technology. Solar and wind are great in that they offer free fuel. Well, you can't beat that. They're also non-polluting. That's a good thing. They don't need a water resource to operate. So those are all positives. But there's also limitations. As Javier pointed out, in the wintertime, when our electric load comes on, and we often, as utilities, will peak twice a day, so we'll have a morning peak, people get up, they turn the heat up a little bit, they start cooking, the lights come on, and the load can come up very quickly. And then it happens again at the end of the traditional workday when people come home, they turn the heat up in their house, they cook dinner, and in both of those time frames, in the wintertime, solar's not much of an option. I'm going to share something very unique about my utility, and it's, again, we have to all be thinking about variations and how do we make things work for everyone. NPPD and our rural wholesale partners have really been leaders in electrical, in beneficial electrification and in demand response with the load management program that's existed for decades in Nebraska for irrigators. As you all know, Nebraska has more irrigated acres than any other state in the country. And a significant amount of that and an increasing amount of it is served with electric pumping for convenience, for cost, reliability, etc. Our system set a new peak this year, unofficially 3,088 megawatts. We have 2,000 megawatts connected through our wholesale partners with all the end-use irrigation that they serve. We can control about 600 megawatts of that. And we move that off peak and it'll all come on at 11 at night when the demand for electricity just isn't what it is elsewhere. So that's a unique example for us. And again, I come back to solar. At 11 at night, solar won't help us serve that load. And I'm not bashing solar. I'm just saying it's important for all of us to understand unique applications, unique customers, and how all of this works, because we need, as Javier has very clearly said, all the generation we can get added in this state. We need diverse resources, but we need to be realistic and come up with creative ideas to make things work. It was great to have Casey here. He really set the stage. We would not have the amount of renewable energy in this state for any individual utility if we were not part of a regional transmission organization. OPPD probably could not integrate as much renewable as it has on its system today if it was solely responsible for balancing the load in the OPPD service territory. But there's a real benefit being part of an RTO. It gives us more flexibility to share resources, to work in a broader region to get these things done. I've mentioned batteries. Batteries and other storage technology, it's critical to the future. And so it was great to have a panel on that. The real challenge is right now we're hanging around 4 hours, and 4 hours isn't enough. In January of 2009, the Pacific Northwest experienced 12 days in a row that they called the dark something. They didn't have wind and they didn't have a lot of sunlight, and it was wintertime. And so, again, those are real world examples. How do we find ways to work around periods where Mother Nature doesn't give us the fuel that we need for solar and for wind? And I think technology will help do that. The other thing that's going to help, and it's been alluded to, is new pricing methods, businesses figuring out I can move my load, I can back away for a while. We need to think holistically about how we address these issues, not just on the power supply side, but on the energy efficiency side and on how we use that electricity. It's going to be very interesting. Evergy, the investor-owned utility that serves Kansas City, has just gone to a time of use pricing. They're going to be implementing it this year. And I think it was driven by the Utility Commission in Missouri. Some people will have the equipment, the smart appliances, the technology to manage that. I have a son who lives down there. He owns 2 Teslas. And he loves to charge, and get a low rate at certain times. He's told me he's going to turn his air conditioning down until 4 o'clock. When the high pricing comes in, he wants to have his house cooled down, and then he's going to shut it down. I feel sorry for the folks that don't have the technology and are going to have to face those high pricing periods. These are things we're going to have to learn as an industry. I was just talking about this opportunity to shift load. That's going to be important for utilities to have the right pricing signals that can move load around, to find customers who are willing to adjust processes, and some need to just operate flat out. That's the way their process works. Others will discover they have the flexibility to move around and have higher loads when there's a vast supply of renewables and take advantage of that. And then others will be in situations where they can't do that and are going to have to deal with the prices. But hopefully technology and equipment will make it better for us to deal with the fluctuation we get from Mother Nature as being a key fuel supplier to the power industry as we go forward. The dark calm is the phrase that they used for the Pacific Northwest. I tried to capture notes and try to have some rational comments. I am looking forward to the question period. I'll mention a couple other things in closing. Yesterday, there were questions about the R project, and again today, we are certainly disappointed that that's not in service. It's critical to reliability, to relieving congestion, and also to helping integrate more generation in the state. Even if we weren't building more generation, we would want that purely for reliability. And it's been hung up over some federal litigation against the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have been working to address that, and we are expecting by the end of next year, we will get what's called a record of decision as part of the supplemental environmental impact statement that is being pursued. And then we have always said it's 2-year construction path to get that in place. And nobody wants that any more than we do, but I know lots of folks in here, including our friends at OPPD, would like to see that, as well as many others. Ultimately, there's no perfect technology to produce electricity. All forms have certain attributes and they have certain challenges. Going forward, you heard Casey say SPP is agnostic on fuel. I don't think the utilities are agnostic. We look at all the attributes for fuel, for dispatchability, for cost, for capital investment, for environmental impacts, and we have to put all that together and figure out what's the right resource mix to reliably, affordably, sustainably, and with resiliency serve our customers. And I think we're all unified on that. The last thing I would mention is we're certainly looking at growth in the state, and because electricity is the essential service of all essential services. I don't care if you're talking about banking, agriculture, all these things that are critical to our society. They all start anymore with electricity. And so I think those of us in this room who are in the industry, who have an obligation to serve load, we take that very seriously because we know we're at the foundation of society, and we know we have a very large responsibility. And I think you'll find the industry in Nebraska, based on our performance as we measure up against others nationally, is up to the challenge. So thank you very much.
I'm going to try and make this real brief because both Javier and John did a great job of kind of framing some things. One of the things I'd like to do, since this is my last round, I kind of wanted to reflect on some things about public power and use LES as an example. If I look back when I started in 2010, for example, LES really had only about 10% of its equivalent, its retail load served from renewable energy. And it got as high as about 53% in 2020, and it's now, I don't know, something like 48% or something. So that change in that period of time is really significant, and we're seeing that all over from all of us in the industry. Our portfolio is dramatically different. It's quite diverse. It's 1/3 renewable, 1/3 coal, 1/3 gas. And all of those things are just reflective of public power, local decision making. Basically, our boards are, in effect, making decisions about our power supply that reflect the values of our communities that we live in and the state, and how that works. Just as an example about the rates comments and reliability comments, we do a competitive market study every year, and we look at 87 cities. Out of that, LES, for example, right, is number 1 in reliability, as the state is kind of reflected when we talk about the state and reliability. With respect to residential rates, we're the 3rd lowest, and I think 16th lowest overall. And by the way, that is like a 140-page report that's online at les.com, and it's really fun if you've got friends and neighbors and family that live in other places, and look up where they live and see how much less you're paying, because it also includes OPPD and NPD. But one of the it does, and they look good. We all look good. That's nice. But it's funny. One of the things we do periodically, and I think it's the best example of, we look at it for Lincoln, but I think it reflects the value of public power in the state, is we run a calculation of just for our residential customers, what if they were paying the national average electric rate? How much more money would our residential customers pay? It's $40 million a year. So if you think about economic development, whether it's MPPD, OPPD, LAS, think about what that is in dollars in our community with respect to it. That's not bringing in outside. That's actually providing that to our communities. And I wasn't saying that to brag, but I mean, that maybe a little. But so this is one of those things I thought was interesting. John referenced the map that's in the program. And this is just a little plug, but I think it is an example, for example, of how I'm proud of what LES does. If you look at both these are done chronologically. If you look at the oldest wind turbines, that's the ones LES, that's top. But if you look at the first large solar, that's LES as well. And that is something that continues to go with being public power, what our boards do. Locally owned, locally governed is critical. And I want to just talk just a few minutes about really some threats. And a lot of those threats and challenges were discussed with what Javier and John said. But, one of them that wasn't raised is threats to public power itself. And, we see them actually legislatively, sometimes driven by political division, sometimes by people who have an issue with certain things. A few years ago, before my time, basically public power was not allowed to lease fiber. Even though you have fiber, you really can't lease it to other providers who may want to provide that kind of service in rural communities, for example. That was a legislative solution. We're looking at trying to find a legislative solution to fix it. Yesterday, Senator Kavanaugh talked about the issues with respect to eminent domain. The first thing we heard about eminent domain in last session was that they wanted to get rid of eminent domain, kind of like Senator Kavanaugh was saying, maybe we just start over. That's another huge issue for us with respect to public power. There's threats with respect to our governance. A couple of years ago, there was threats with respect to maybe making the governance of the utilities appointed from the governor's office. And so there's issues like that, and you may or may not fall out in different areas of that. But really, if you think about how important public power is, the critical infrastructure issue, and the critical service, we all need to stay aware of what's happening with respect to legislative proposals as well. Just a few other things that kind of, since I'm trying to leave time for the questions, I read an article last week. The Wall Street Journal had an article that the International Energy Agency, which is a kind of a large agency that looks at worldwide, said that in order to meet net zero 2040 decarbonization goal in the world, would require 50 million miles of transmission lines. And they said that's basically enough to go around the world 2,000 times. So even if they're wrong, and it's 1,000 times, and it's 25 million miles of transmission, we know where those challenges come when we're looking at supply chain issues, workforce issues, all the things that weren't even referenced in this. And the supply chain issues aren't just, you've heard about transformers, how hard they are to get, the delivery times are, or even distribution transformers are a year and a half now compared to 12 weeks before COVID. Prices are 2.5 times higher. But it's supply chain issues, for example, on things like gas turbines. When you have gas turbines under maintenance, we've had some that have been out for several months just because they can't get the parts. So when we talk about the resource adequacy and the challenges, there's all sorts of things that dovetail into that. Everything from that issue with respect to eminent domain, what can we build and not build, but supply chain issues, the workforce issues, the technology upgrades, all of those things come into play. I'll just use 5 minutes. How's that? And one thing I did want to say is it's been a privilege. I've been here 13 years. I've been in the industry for 47, all of them in public power utilities. I've managed a public power utility in Colorado, Florida, and Nebraska. And I'll tell you, public power does it right, but Nebraska does it best. The relationship we have within the industry is basically consistent. We all have goals. We all want to do the right thing for our customers. It's it's an amazing thing, even with respect to resource. We're talking about if there's opportunities, then the three of us may look at common sites for generation. We're looking at these significant issues, but we're doing it as a team, trying to find the best way to serve our customers in Nebraska. So thank you.
We do have time for a few questions. You can either stand up and shout it from the floor. There should be a microphone around. Did you hear that question? What percentage of the vehicles in your foot? How big would we have to get with electric vehicles before the grid would go down? Basically,
I don't have a specific answer to that, but I'll take an opportunity here. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to coordinate with our customer owners. That is one area where we have a solution on charging and time of use and advanced metering infrastructure. We can help and we can work with our customers on when they charge. So the challenges that we have to put up a lot more transformers and strengthen the distribution grid is important. I don't want to ignore that piece, but I think from a load perspective, I am less worried about that load coming in as I am about hospitals, schools, manufacturing. Those are coming in, and I don't have the same ability to shift when they use electricity. With electric vehicles, there are many ways for us to do that. It's not going to be easy, but it's relatively a better load to manage.
Javier's right. Plus, I think that the move to electric vehicles is going to be slow enough, and we have demand management tools for that. I think one of the concerns I've got, and we talk about heat pumps and they're being more efficient, and that's great. Most of it, a lot of us have heat pumps at home. I'm concerned as we see this huge ramp up accelerated for heat pumps, that because the aim is going to have basically electric backup heat, so that when you're at this, temperatures of let's say 10 or 20 degrees, the heat pump really can't keep up with what it needs to do. So you're going to electric heat. That's 3 to 4 times the load that heat pump would be, and it's only on for a very short period of time. So it's going to be that 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock time that Javier was referring to. And think about that. So you're actually going to be bumping that requirement in your home for only a little bit of time, but we have to have the resources to serve it when it's there, and it's going to be this huge spike. Data center is a load that's, for example, 85%, load factor. But if you look at this strip and these heat pumps, it's going to be for a few hours. But you've got to have the supply to serve it. That to me is a much higher risk because we can't move that load.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? Why is the winter load increasing at the rate that it is?
Because we are seeing a lot more heating coming in from electric sources, moving away from natural gas. Whereas summer, it's the same air conditioning, you're using a lot more, but it's not necessarily a big transition in technology or segment of the economy. What we're seeing in winter is different. It's heating. That's back to Kevin's example. That's where my understanding, that's what's causing the higher increase in winter.
I have another question. A couple of you referred to the role of energy storage, and we're all looking for that solution to expand, for the technology to mature. Are you aware of, any of you aware of where the technology is going? It reminds me very much of the early days of wind, frankly, and the concerns around the technology. Well, we've seen what's happened over the last 20 years or so with technology there. Perhaps that's instructive. Do any of you have comments on where that can go? Because certainly it is an important part of the future.
I'm really excited. So we live I was born in Mexico and I immigrated here. We live in the best, the most amazing country in the world, period, hands out. We have the ingenuity, we have the enterprise, we have the bright minds to figure things out, and we've done that for centuries. And I have no doubt that that's exactly what's going to happen with energy storage. We've been dealing with lithium-ion batteries for a really long time. I have a vehicle that runs on them, and I really appreciate that reliability when I'm driving. However, I'm also very excited about the new technology that's coming in, and we're seeing long duration. We talked about the 4 hours versus 8 hours to 12 hours, iron flow batteries, and many other technologies. They're showing a lot of promise. I'm really excited about that, and I have zero doubt in my mind that we will find out. They're already here. It's whether or not we can bring them online commercially to the volumes that we need fast enough, economically. Right.
Kevin or John, any comment?
Maybe a separate comment. Yesterday there was a question that was going to be referred to this panel, for example, about how much do we anticipate hydrogen is going to do.
Oh, thank you.
And, my thought process with that is not unlike the question about what percentage of wind and solar are we going to see. It's technology dependent. It's going to be, obviously our load's going to dictate that, but in part it's also going to be the technology because it evolves. None of us can drive a stake in the ground and say, this is what we're going to need 10 years from now, because the whole world, the landscape's going to change. With hydrogen, if you think about it, if we're going to end up using it as a generation fuel, we're going to have pipeline capability with hydrogen. And we know how easy that is to build, notwithstanding the price of hydrogen. But all of us are looking at ways to prepare for that. For example, we actually have been getting quotes from General Electric to look at doing conversions so we know what it would take to actually convert our gas turbines to hydrogen. I'm not sure I believe their prices, but the preparation for this is different than recognizing what the reality of it is and when we can do it.
Thank you, Kevin. And I think we'll probably have to leave it there. So please join me with a round of applause for Javier Fernandez, Kevin Wailes, John McClure.